Hello, y'all. I am fortunate enough to be here today with Mr. Eric Drew. Eric, I'm not going to steal your thunder. Who are you and what the heck you're doing here today?
Oh boy, that's a long, loaded question there, Brian. Thank you, though. So, one of the things I'm a board certified patient advocate. For 20 years, I've been helping patients and leading different patient centered medical initiatives in the U.S. and abroad. I'm a speaker. I've done over 200 keynote talks and was on speaking circuit for years, actually, as a spokesperson for pharmaceutical companies and for the U.S. government, medical initiatives, legal initiatives, everything else. I'm also the first person to catch and prosecute a HIPAA violation in the U.S. So by default, I sort of became I guess, a privacy advocate and identity theft. I wouldn't say identity theft advocate, but an advocate against identity theft. So,
Yeah.
I spoke for the U.S. Attorney's Office and Secret Service, and how did I catch this guy on my own when the FBI and everybody else just told me to take a hike? So I was a patient, actually, fighting for my life in a Seattle hospital with a terminal leukemia, and a hospital worker stole my identity and went on a shopping spree. So knowing that my treatments and transplants at that time were failing, I just decided if it was the last thing I was going to do, I was going to catch this, who, and bring him to justice, and I did. HIPAA just went into effect a couple of months before, at the beginning of 2004. So it just worked out that I forced that first prosecution of the first HIPAA violation, or first HIPAA prosecution, I should say.
So it was a nurse, or it was someone helping, or a doctor that
It
was
was a lab
helping
tech.
you?
Yeah. So I had been at Stanford for 9 months, and I had just recently transferred to the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center in Seattle because Stanford essentially, sent me to hospice and said nothing could be done, and I wasn't going to accept that. So I went up to the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center in Seattle, where my half sister happened to be a physician, a doctor up there, and she offered to be the donor for bone marrow and stem cells for a experimental transplant. So we tried that twice, and both of those treatments failed. But that's where the identity theft happened and everything else. So it was one of the top. I mean, the Cadillac of cancer treatment in the U.S. Is where that happened. So pretty crazy story. That was 20 years ago. I'm now the oldest surviving. Well, I went on just my medical story real quick. I went on to all those treatments in Seattle failed, and essentially every medical center in the U.S. said nothing we can do. You're beyond what we can do anything for, and so we recommend you go to hospice and make yourself comfortable. And I had been tired. I've been told that 20 times already. So turns out I had been a software executive. I live here in the Silicon Valley, and I represented global software companies in their Europe, Middle East, Africa territories. And I worked out of London and Munich and several cities in Europe for several years. And I had a pretty high level Rolodex because my clients were the, VPs and Geschäftsführers of the, top, Europe's Fortune 100 companies. And so I before I was going to go home and die without looking what was available to me outside of the U.S., I contacted these people and said, put me in touch with the top physicians in your country. And within a week, I had a small list of the top transplant hematology doctors in their country. And it was a doctor in Geneva that just, got on the phone with me and said, no, you have options. I mean, your bone marrow is simply a source of stem cells. If you don't have a match for bone marrow, which I didn't, why don't you, I had no full siblings, I only had half siblings. Why don't you find another source of stem cells? Have you looked into umbilical cord blood from newborn babies? I said, yes, I have. And I see that it successfully can transplant children, but for some reason, all the adults in all the U.S. attempts to use these umbilical cord stem cells on adults have failed. And he says, kind of rolled his eyes, and he's, this is what I've been working on with my colleagues in Italy. And we figured out last year that this was just a volume issue, that the reason the children were surviving and the adults weren't was because one little baby's umbilical cord blood sample is not enough to seed an adult body. And that, maybe a child needs 100 million cells for a transplant, an adult needs 300 million cells for a transplant, to successfully engraft and take over as the new blood, bone marrow, and immune system. And so, this was the simple little solution. I went through 2 years of grueling treatment, most of which had no chances of curing me. And it beat me up, caused very severe permanent damage to my body. But now I had a solution. And so, I suffered dearly by all those treatments that before I found the treatment that saved my life. I went blind from cataracts. My bones in my legs just completely died, and in most of my joints. I've had over 30 surgeries total on my legs, putting in more and more metal, reinforcing things. Some of the replacements have been revised 4 and 5 times. So it's been a long road, but I've continued working. I managed a nonprofit for 20 years that is still in existence, that was started by the Silicon Valley community to save my life. And basically it's, talking about, well, some of the things I mentioned in my previous TED talk, but something I would very much like to focus on in the future, in any future talks, is really the elephant in the room. We have, some of the top medical centers in the world. As a matter of fact, we have 18 of the top 20 rated medical centers in the world in the US. We come out with 75 to 80% of the world's new biotechnology every year in the US. Yet we fall to 30th, 40th in the world in some categories, in some therapeutic areas. That's horrible. So it's very obvious where the disconnection is to me, because I've been through it. And the obvious disconnection is that every hospital, every medical center operates independently, that everybody's, operating independently and for their own interest. So they have these agendas. You have insurance company agendas. You have pharmaceutical company agendas. You have the agendas of the medical centers. You have the agendas of the individual doctors and professors at the medical centers, and especially the big, large teaching medical centers, because they have their name on certain trials. And so depending on, as a patient, you're just kind of like this ping pong ball that's being bounced around between all these agendas. Whereas the agenda for the patient, which is very simple, okay, I want to be cured of this ailment, this disease, this diagnosis as quickly as possible with the least amount of damage to my body as possible, so I can move on with my life, which unfortunately I was unable to do in a sense, that I wasn't able to move on with the life I had before, because they destroyed my quality of life in a lot of ways. So that was not even a consideration. But basically the patient, what's best for the patient is way down on the totem pole. Maybe they consider what's best for the patient within their system, because that's all they're at liberty to speak about or talk about or offer, right? So there's no larger coordination. And you'd think the insurance companies might have an interest in doing this. They spent millions of dollars on a bunch of treatment for me that never had any chance of saving me. Why? Why didn't they supply an advocate that would have come in and that knows medical science and say, look, you know what, there's a treatment, there's a technology that could save this guy. 4 months of treatment, he's back home and moving on with his life, and he's no long-term damage or very little. But they don't even consider that, So I ended up having to learn the hard way, and then going through all those treatments that really, destroyed my body and quality of life in a lot of ways, and but never had any chance of a long-term remission or cure. So, really, to me, it's so obvious. Patient advocacy is not built into our system. The patients aren't represented. What's best for a patient is only considered within and after those other agendas that I mentioned. So when you walk into a medical center, especially as a rare disease cancer patient, or a very, something very acute and terminal, I can't imagine a rougher cancer than I had, that basically a cancer of my immune system that kills you within a week. It just takes over your whole body, and you die of like a combination of AIDS, hemophilia, and anemia at the same time. So it's not the AIDS virus, but it's the same result. You don't have an immune system. You don't have red blood cells taking nutrients to your body, and you don't have platelets to stop bleeding. So pretty rough way to go, and it's very, very fast. So anyway, yeah, when you walk into a medical center, who's representing you? I look at it. I talk about it in these terms in all the keynote talks that I've done. If we have this legal system, right? But it's very complicated. The terms are complicated. The processes are complicated. We won't even let a criminal or an accused criminal walk into a courtroom without representation. Why? Because he doesn't know the terminology. He doesn't know how to make the motions. He doesn't know how the system works. It's unfair. It's an unfair situation to put somebody in. Yet we're throwing our loved ones and our children and into these situations in medicine where they have no representation and where their agendas are not the primary agenda. So, I mean, there are a lot of great doctors and a lot of great medical centers out there, and I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for them. So I just want to, disclaim that there's a lot of wonderful, again, medical practitioners and doctors and clinics and amazing technology out there, but they're working within the confines of a system where patients are not built into it, where patient advocacy, doctors simply don't get reimbursed for doing the research to find out what would be the very best treatment for this patient, what would give them the best chances at a long-term remission and survival without serious damage to their body or with a minimal amount of damage to their body. And where is that treatment? And let's get them there. When you look at the way clinical trials are rolled out and the way medical centers are, forwarding medical science and things like that, they can't do everything for everybody. And now cancer treatment is so precise to the mutation that is being treated that, it's almost like it's a very, very specific, so there's, well, you understand just some of it, I'm sure, but there's probably only 3 or 4 medical centers in the country that are doing the best possible treatment for any given cancer patient, put it that way. So that, there's within a certain therapeutic area, leukemias, or let's just say AML or ALL, or one of the more hardcore leukemias and things like that. Within that, there's sort of a standard of care that pretty much all medical centers in the U.S. will offer. And then there's the more advanced clinical studies that are being done. But those clinical studies are usually a combination of the most advanced approaches, combination therapies, and they would most likely be the optimal treatment for an individual cancer patient because they're using the most advanced approaches in the different areas of cancer treatment. You have conventional treatment, which is radiation, chemo, surgery, and then you have the kinase inhibitors, which attack the metabolic process of the cancer, and you have and then you have obviously the new thing, which is the golden goose of cancer treatment, and that is the immune therapies, training the immune system to kill the cancer. But the most advanced combinations of these therapies are going to be only being done in clinical studies, and they're going to be at 3 or 4 medical centers in the country. So, to be able to isolate what that is and to, advocate for a patient to get there is a complicated issue, but that's what I did. I mean, I kept just pushing the envelope of new technology, of trying new things and everything else, and insisted that I get that level of care, and that's why I'm alive today. So,
and this was in 2004, you said, right?
So I was diagnosed in December 2002. I spent about 9 months at Stanford going through just a brutal, almost died several times. As a matter of fact, had bad reactions to medications. I mean, at one point I went, code blue, cardiac arrest. I was in ICU for several days. I mean, it was a real struggle. I mean, essentially they would, the protocol I was at Stanford was they would hit me with a terminal dose, a lethal dose, I should say, a terminal dose, so a lethal dose of different chemotherapy every month for 8 months. But basically this this whole protocol was designed to collect information about the efficacy of different drugs, because no amount of radiation or chemo could have possibly cured me. It never had cured any Philadelphia chromosome positive ALL patient. The only way to cure me was to kill out and replace my entire blood, bone marrow, and immune system. It's like getting a virus on your hard drive, and you got to wipe out your hard drive and reboot with a new operating system, right? That's the only way to do it.
And this tech from the guy in Geneva did this?
Sorry?
This tech or this solution from the doctor in Geneva, did that replace all of that?
You mean the treatment that finally saved me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Wow.
the difference is, yeah. So what the difference is of what I was doing at Stanford was they were just giving me different high dose chemos and tracking the results of that. You know,
wow.
Whereas the transplant that I had eventually in Minnesota, at the University of Minnesota in the Mayo building there, was a replacement. You know, just like a bone marrow transplant, they give you a very, very high dose of chemo and whole total body irradiation to kill every blood and bone marrow cell in your body. And it's a Hail Mary. You're not coming back from that. So if the new cells that they put in you the next day after the last radiation therapy, before all of your cells start dying out, they put the new cells in you, flush the chemo out, flush the radiation out, and it's already done its damage. So then the next day they put these new cells in you, and that's called the conditioning regimen, doing all the chemo and radiation and then flushing it out of you. Then over the next few days, every blood, bone marrow, and immune cell in your body is dying. I mean, you can literally just feel your whole body sort of melting. But right after that, they put the new cells in you, and then they give you a bunch of steroids and all kinds of things to get those to grow, and hopefully just walk that razor's edge of keeping you, killing you, but then keeping you alive.
Wow.
So you're essentially on life support. You're living on donated blood and platelets for about 3 months because your body can't produce that yet. And so probably 3 infusions of whole blood and 2 infusions of platelets a day is sort of average. And your body just burns right through it. But the only way to take to stay alive and take nutrients to the cells in your body is through donated blood. And that's why leukemia patients need so much. By the way, I was diagnosed with leukemia because I went into the Red Cross that I had been doing for 8 years for a monthly donation of platelets to kids with leukemia. So I was donating to kids fighting leukemia and found out I had it.
Wow.
So pretty crazy. Yeah. Just a lot of crazy points in the story, but hope I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And then some. So what did it like? I'm trying to imagine just the way it felt for you to almost know that you were kind of this experiment for these people and not know if you would like say, hey, we're going to try this. You didn't know if you were going to die or not. Like it could be,
No.
oh yeah. So how did you deal with that?
Well, so at first, the first 8 months at Stanford, honestly, that the medical team that was responsible for me, and I don't want to, poo-poo Stanford too much. They're a fantastic medical center. They have amazing doctors and amazing clinics. And I still go there and see many different providers. But the particular medical team that was in charge of me, I feel was completely unethical. They were not honest with me. I thought during that 8-month period of time that they were trying to cure me, but they knew exactly that the treatments that they were, giving me had no chance without a fully ablative transplant, that there was no chance of my survival. And so they were just literally just had decided that I was unsavable, that I was incurable at the beginning, and that they would keep me in this protocol, basically that they had their name, this clinical trial that's, studying the efficacy of these drugs, knowing that it was a death sentence for me. They weren't honest about that. Not at all. It was completely unethical, in my opinion.
They didn't tell you? They didn't
No.
tell you exactly?
And they did. And they also, I relapsed I fully relapsed. Like the first initial 3 or 4 months of those chemotherapy doses, lethal as they were, did eradicate my disease temporarily. Didn't eradicate the mutation that was causing it, so my disease will inevitably come back. But it did come back, and it came back about halfway through, maybe 4 or 5 months into that program, but they didn't tell me. I found out that I was in complete relapse because they didn't want me to drop out of the program or leave, because they wanted to finish the trial and continue collecting their information so they would get paid. That's how it works. If you don't finish the trial or whatever, then, they don't get paid for that patient or whatnot. I mean, there's incentives for them to keep patients in the studies. So, no, they didn't tell me I had relapsed. I found out when I went up to Seattle and was meeting with the doctors up there to discuss possibilities, because my sister, again, was a doctor up there. So, they told me, they said, oh, they're looking through my chart. Oh, yes. So you relapsed in June. I'm like, what? What do you mean I relapsed? My cancer is fully back. I didn't know that. They didn't tell me. I mean, it was just, one thing after another like that. So anyway, yeah, completely different. At least I can say that the medical team that I had at the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center was very transparent and honest and open with me. They told me, look, we're going to try these experimental half-match transplants, but they only, we give them, first of all, they've never worked on anybody before. This is an experiment. But we're going to try this. And maybe the same would have been true of Stanford if they actually had been transparent and honest with me. Nobody has ever survived doing this, but we're giving this a shot. I mean, do we even expect it to work, even though nobody has ever, at least these were transplants in Seattle, and the only people that had ever survived my disease before was through transplants. So, maybe this has got a chance of working. And so they just kind of shot in the dark and gave it a 5% chance of working or something. But really, I don't think they ever worked. And I think they canceled those programs after a year or so. So, but basically, it was that simple. It was just that no amount of radiation or chemo, in a sense, the mutation that was causing my leukemia was more virulent than my own cells, and that no amount of radiation or chemo would cure me because that mutation would come back. No matter what you did, you could kill me with radiation and chemo, and they essentially did, and then brought me back to life with life support, and those cells were still alive in me. So the mutation was still there. So, like I said, the only way to get rid of it is to kill out all those cells and all that DNA that's now infected with that mutation, that virus, basically, and replace it with a whole new DNA, a whole new, So now my blood is female. It's from a little baby girl. I turned 20 about 3 weeks ago.
Congrats.
Yeah. So my blood is now 20 years old. It had been frozen for 8 years. They had hand carried it from Milan, Italy. So the doctor in Geneva found the cells in a little cryobank in Milan, Italy that I actually went and visited 10 years ago. And it's just this little dank basement in a 500-year-old building. And I'm like, wow, this is in a little bag of cells and that little that little tub of nitrogen and that tub sitting in the corner. That was the key to saving my life the whole time. And just needed to ask the right questions and don't give up. There's always hope, right? You just got to keep, there's a solution to every problem. You just got to figure it out.
A very entrepreneurial type of mindset coming from Silicon Valley with that idea.
Yeah, exactly.
For going through all this, how do you view and what has been the shift in your perspective on life and business and everything you do every day now as a result of all this?
Well, I mean, I think, the title of my book that's still being worked on that I haven't come out yet, been working on it for 20 years, is more written than I can put into a book. So now I got to figure out what to take out of it to be able to publish it. But it's all good. ALL was the name of my disease. So, it's all good. And life is short. Life is magical. It's worth fighting for. And, every moment that we have with the people, and the most important thing in our lives is the people and the time we spend with them. And so that magic is, like I said, is worth fighting for. And I mean, it's better than the alternative, right? No matter how no matter how hard life has been since then, with all of the bones dying and the surgeries and the pains and the struggles and fighting myself out of a wheelchair, dozens of times. And, but it's all worth it because it's all good. Just being alive is an amazing gift that we should appreciate and treasure a lot more than we do. So
what do you do now that fulfills you the most after going through all this experience?
helping people, I will always do that. Right now I'm taking a step away from managing the foundation and looking at new career changes in my life, to what's the next step. I've been working with a lot with AI. So I've been working with an AI startup that applies new technology to clinical studies, to clinical research, how to optimize. If we can use technology to, um, uh, find the optimal patients and things like that within databases, for a clinical study and everything else, then we can start finding the optimal treatments for patients using this technology, right? I mean, it's just simply a reverse tack on how you're using it. But, we need to do better. We need to automate advocacy for patients. It should be AI can be used now to, filter so much information that soon it will be an option to use AI to find the optimal combination therapies for patients. I mean, they're already doing it. And so, maybe if AI had been around when I was sick, maybe AI would have told me, hey, all these treatments that are available at these US hospitals are a waste of time. None of them are going to be able to cure you. There's these guys over here in Switzerland or Italy have developed a technology that would, and so it would have saved a lot of time and headache and trouble for me. That's for sure. So
And
anyway, I'm looking at ways and companies, I'm forwarding my education and at top, top learning facilities and things like that. So we'll see what the next step is for me. Is it another launch of a speaking tour? Is it, finishing my book and just kind of, becoming an educator? I mean, I don't know. We'll see. Yeah.
that's a cool point to be in. And when did you give your first TEDx talk?
The first TEDx talk, the only TEDx talk I've done is one
Okay.
of them, was at just after the opening of Netflix headquarters
Okay.
here in Silicon Valley. And they organized a TED talk, to sort of, launch and promote the new facility and everything else. And so, I was the keynote chosen to do that TEDx talk.
You act so humble about that, as if that's not a huge deal. And what was the impact on your life and the changes that you saw in your life, your businesses, your everything as a result of that?
A massive amount of exposure, obviously, so, yeah. And to this day, more and more people, still access that. They still talk about it. It's accessible permanently. So, I think when it comes time to launch my book, it'll be extremely helpful. And it's a credibility thing, right? I mean, I didn't do it for credibility. I did it because I was asked to do it, but I'm so glad that I did. Yeah. I mean, I don't think, I guess maybe my story didn't need any more credibility because I've already done, Dateline and, dozens of national TV shows and CNN morning show and things like that. But I think it was a platform to allow me to tell my story in a way that was mine, right? It wasn't an interview. It wasn't somebody else's, format or agenda or anything else. No offense, but it was mine. And I was able to, they gave me a lot of leeway. I know a lot of TEDx talks are 10 minutes or 12 minutes or, short ones. Mine was one of the longest. It was, 22 minutes or something.
Wow.
And that was with a couple edits. So they just really gave me the leeway and freedom to go up there and tell us, and so I was able to do that. Like I said, in future talks that I would do, I would do a short version of, the elephant in the room for me, which is, the lack of advocacy in our medical system in the US is why we falls so, we have some of the top technologies, and we have some of the top technologies in medical centers and physicians and everything else, but why are we falling 30th and 40th for outcomes? There's a big disconnection there. So let's solve that.
And how did Netflix find you?
I wouldn't say it was Netflix. So Netflix hosted the event, but they had so they assigned an event coordinator or a director or somebody that applied for that position or somehow was chosen to do that, and it was, I think, talking to different people in the Silicon Valley community, my story came up. And they, in interviewing me and my story and the impact that it's had, they chose me for the keynote talk. So,
and
that's how it happened. So I don't think Netflix as a company didn't write me a letter and say, "Come speak at a TEDx event." It was the coordinator of this specific TEDx event. Yeah.
Now, let's say people have been listening here and they want to find you on the internet somewhere. Where can they kind of put a little mini version of Eric Drew in their pocket?
Sure. Well, I mean, the TEDx Talk's a great place to start. So you just Google my name and TED Talk, Eric Drew TED Talk, and it'll come right up. So I recommend doing that. There are, there's the foundation website that's, talks about some of the advocacy that we recommend, and there's how to research clinical trials, and but there's a lot of media available on there. So Discover Magazine did a feature. I was recently featured 2 months ago in Cure Magazine. So just Googling my name, I think, is about all you need to do to find a lot of that.
You're Googleable. That's awesome.
Googleable, yeah. Yeah, I have a Wikipedia page, but boy, I haven't looked at it in a long time, and I bet there's a lot that's not there. But anyway.
One more question for you here that I'm personally very curious about from your experiences that you've had, both professionally and with this health endeavor that you went through.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is one knowledge nugget that you would want to give to the aspiring speaker, the professional speaker, or the entrepreneur who speaks to grow their business from everything that you've experienced in your life today? You want to drop this wisdom to them that if you could go back to when you were 20 years old or 30 years old or 40 years old and give yourself that would make the difference in ways you 10x, 1000x your life.
Wow, that's a deep question, but I would say follow your dreams and take advantage of opportunities, because don't be shy, and whether you're ready for them or not, those opportunities are going to come to you. And I think the only regrets you're going to have in life are not doing things that you could have done, not trying something and failing, and so if there's an opportunity to go do something that you've dreamed about or whatnot, don't delay, don't question it. It's not the right time. Jump in and do it. I mean, otherwise, 20 years later, you're looking back on your life and going, darn, I wish I would have given myself that shot, or I wish I would have taken that opportunity. Those are, like I said, those are the only really the regrets you have in life, not doing something and failing at it. So
that's beautiful.
Jump in.
Well, if there's a listener here and you're listening to this and you've got a friend in mind that would find what Eric has just shared with us here, share this episode just with one friend, with one person that you think it can make that difference with, because you never know. It might make that 1-inch difference that 10 years from now might make their life an entirely different life that they wouldn't, be living if you hadn't shared this with them. So Eric, thank you for taking the time to do this, and guys, thank you for listening.
Cheers. Ryan, it was my pleasure. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.